The first companies that come to mind when you think about EVs are Tesla, Rivian, NIO, and Lucid. In terms of legacy automakers, Volkswagen and Ford are making a pretty good push as well. But have you ever heard of a company called BYD? In the Western world, BYD vehicles are basically non-existent, but in China, BYD is a rather popular choice. BYD isn't some new startup that was created to leverage EV hype either. BYD has actually been around since 1995, and they've been involved in the automotive business since 2003. Moreover, unlike Lucid and Rivian who have barely sold any cars, BYD is a leader in EV sales. In fact, within the first 9 months of 2021, BYD was only beaten out by Tesla in terms of EV deliveries. And they're currently the third largest automotive company in the world by market cap. BYD was actually the world's largest EV company until Tesla's recent parabolic run. So here's the story of the EV behemoth that most of you have never heard of. Taking a look back, the story of BYD dates back to a poor man named Wang Chuanfu. Wang was born on April 8, 1966 in Wuwei County to a couple of poor farmers. By the time Wang was a teenager, both of his parents had passed away and he was being raised by his older brother and sister. For Wang, education was the only viable path out of his situation, so he attended Central South University where he majored in chemistry. He would instantly turn around and get his master's from the Beijing Non-Ferrous Research Institute in 1990. Wang's initial goal was to simply live a modest life by being a good engineer, and as such, Wang became a government researcher out of college. He worked at the General Research Institute for Non-Ferrous Metals, where his job was to research rare earth metals that could be used in batteries. He spent a couple of years here, but he found very little fulfillment from this job. So, in 1995, he teamed up with his cousin Lu Xiangyang to create BYD. Wang has never revealed the true meaning of BYD, but he often jokes that it stands for Bring You Dollars or Build Your Dreams. Anyway, BYD wasn't an automotive company from day one, they were actually a battery company. Wang didn't have any connections or very much brand power, but what he did have was expertise in batteries. And given that the laptop and mobile phone markets were booming, this knowledge was extremely valuable. BYD started off by producing batteries for small consumer tech items like portable lights and solar modules. But as BYD built a name for themselves, they were able to secure larger jobs, like producing batteries for Black & Decker power tools, Nokia handsets, Dell laptops, and most importantly, the classic Motorola Razr flip phone. Wang was able to build a great relationship with Motorola. In fact, Motorola was so impressed with BYD that the chairman of Motorola awarded BYD for being an excellent supplier. The road wasn't all smooth though. Two notable companies, Sanyo Electric Company and Sony, would sue BYD for intellectual property theft. BYD would end up settling with Sanyo while the Sony lawsuit was rejected by a Japanese court. If you were being sued by these guys, it definitely meant that you were a serious threat. And now that BYD had built a name for themselves, Wang decided to take the company public in 2002. Using the raised funds, Wang purchased a majority stake in a failing state-owned car company called Xi'an Qinchuan Auto Company, and this marks the beginning of BYD Auto. At first, BYD simply continued to sell the Flyer that Xi'an had already developed. The Flyer sold decently, pulling in 20,000 sales per year, but it wasn't anything too crazy. In the background though, BYD was working hard at reverse engineering every car they could get their hands on. They reverse engineered engines, molds, motors, entertainment systems, and Wang's S-Class. In other words, they were copying everything. Wang was actually notorious for ordering large quantities of parts from a notable supplier and then never ordering again because he had reverse engineered the item and learned to build it himself. After a few years of copying, reverse engineering, BYD came out with their first model since the acquisition called the F3. The front of the F3 looks awfully similar to the 2003 Toyota Corolla, but despite their similar looks, the F3 was far cheaper, which made it much more attractive to many customers. Over the next few years, BYD launched a handful of cars like the F6, and basically all of these were rip-offs of different vehicles from Toyota. It should also be noted that none of these vehicles were electric, so BYD wasn't really adding anything to these vehicles other than a lower price. It wasn't until 2008 that BYD jumped into the EV market with the launch of the F3DM. The F3DM was a dual-motor hybrid that had a pure electric range of 60 miles, and it was actually the first plug-in hybrid in the world. But despite this title, consumers didn't really care. The F3DM was basically just an electric Corolla and it didn't have the appeal that EVs have today. So the launch ended up being a massive flop in both China and internationally. But despite the underwhelming launch, BYD was definitely onto something. They were targeting the utilitarian EV market, which is likely to become the biggest portion of the EV industry over the next few decades. But in the late 2000s, this market simply wasn't developed yet. Most utility car buyers preferred to stick with cheaper gas alternatives, and EV customers were generally premium consumers, so BYD was stuck in no man's land. Wang didn't want to jump into the luxury vehicle market though, so he looked closer into who might be interested in utility-focused EVs, and the answer was clear: governments. Governments don't care about buying cool-looking vehicles. They just want the most cost-effective vehicle, and if it's eco-friendly, that's just a bonus. So in 2009, BYD started focusing their efforts into mass-producing electric buses. BYD sold these buses to Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Los Angeles, and Albuquerque. But this launch was actually quite controversial. Albuquerque would end up returning the buses due to mechanical issues. Meanwhile, California received several complaints that the buses were manufactured by people earning just $1.50 per hour. Despite these concerns, BYD continued to target the government by manufacturing electric garbage trucks, airport shuttles, tractors, and mining trucks. Around the same time, Warren Buffett would invest $232 million into BYD in 2008. All of this extra interest combined with their government endeavors allowed BYD to reach 500,000 deliveries by 2010. To put that in perspective, Tesla didn't reach that figure until 10 years later in 2020. But unlike Tesla, who's blasting past that number, BYD has been stuck at 500,000 for a decade. While a decade of no sales growth sounds really bad from the surface, it's actually not too bad in BYD's case. Wang figured that the utility consumer EV market still had years, if not decades, to develop. I mean, even now, sub-$30,000 EVs aren't that common. So Wang decided to simply maintain what BYD was doing and instead focus their effort into building a real brand. Up until then, BYD was really just a Chinese knockoff that people only bought for the price. But this would all change with BYD's second-generation cars. The first of these second-gen vehicles was the BYD Kin Hybrid, which debuted in 2013. Just by looking at it, you can see that this was nothing like BYD's older vehicles. The Kin wasn't a super sleek vehicle or anything, but for the first time, it was original. Aside from its unique look, the Kin was also quite affordable. The Kin wasn't able to live up to BYD's promised launch price of just under $30,000, but it did launch for $35,000, which is still cheaper than the Model 3 today. Following the Kin, BYD came out with the Yuan in March of 2016. The Yuan was offered as a compact crossover SUV that was offered as a hybrid and as a full EV. The hybrid version cost between $32,000 and $38,000, so still under that $40K mark. Both the Kin and Yuan were solid vehicles, but by far their biggest jump forward came with the Han, which was released in July of 2020. The Han instantly sticks out as a modern EV with its sleek design, but not only does it look good, it's also quite affordable. The standard range comes with 314 miles of range and only costs $33,730. You can also get the extended range, which comes with 376 miles of range and costs $36,540. BYD quickly followed up the Han with the sleek SUV called the Song in September of 2020. The Song also boasts a range above 300 miles and comes in under $40K. So, though BYD sales have remained stagnant for a decade, I think we'd agree that BYD is a completely different company today than they were in 2010. As for BYD today, I believe that they're on the cusp of a massive boom. In July, the Han crossed 100,000 deliveries, and I don't really see anything stopping them from reaching millions. Also, BYD formed a partnership with Toyota 2 years ago. Originally, it seemed like they were just going to manufacture some models together, but they actually ended up creating a new car company called BYD Toyota in April of 2020. It's not clear when they'll launch their first car, but it should be within the next few years as neither of them are new to the car business. In terms of international expansion, BYD does have some presence within Latin America and some Scandinavian countries, but the vast majority of their business comes from China. Wang does eventually want to spend more time on the Western market, with his long-term goal being 20-30% of sales coming from outside China. But even if that doesn't materialize, it's not that big of a deal given the strength of the Chinese EV market. The CCP has made some super questionable moves in the past, but their embracement of EVs is definitely not one of them. Experts predict that as much as 40% of Chinese vehicles could be electric by 2030. Considering this, it wouldn't be that surprising to see BYD overtake Toyota within this decade, but it would be extremely ironic. BYD went from knocking out Toyota, to partnering with Toyota, to overtaking Toyota. As for Wang, his net worth comes in at about $25 billion, which puts him comfortably within the top 100 richest people in the world. And I think Wang more than deserves all of it, given that BYD is one of the only companies in the EV space that not only has hype, but also results. Were you guys familiar with BYD? Comment that down below. Also, drop a like if you think that legacy automakers should get more serious about EVs. And of course, consider joining our Discord community to suggest future video ideas and consider subscribing to see more questions logically answered. But until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.